I became addicted to marijuana, and that led me into actually dealing marijuana and selling it to my friends and getting into all kinds of messes. But my desire for marijuana got pushed to the side one day when one of the little fellas that I was dealing marijuana with, he turned me on to a drug called cocaine. And that's when the roller coaster got a lot faster at that point in time. And so he and I, we based our friendship, you want to call it that, on favors. He do me favors, I do him favors, and you know, there's old sayings out there about cocaine. Not ever try it once, you'll be hooked. Well, I'm a living testimony of that. I've done it the first time, and I chased it from then on. I lived under the influence of marijuana and alcohol and cocaine for a very long time. Like I said, I was 15 or 16 when I started experimenting with it, and at this point in time, I'm getting close to the age of 31 years old. And my addiction for cocaine and this party of life, it kept leading me. It kept leading me further and further out. You know that old saying, the devil will take you to places that you never thought you'd go, and he'll keep you longer than you ever intended on staying. That's the truth. And you know, I always stood up for what I thought was right for me and my family. I was raising my family the best I could. Financially, I was doing fine. I thought I was on top of the world. And you know, the crazy part about it was I'd sit back and I'd brag about how much I loved my wife and how much I loved my kids. And the whole time, I was taking things away from my kids and taking things away from my wife just to feed my hunger for cocaine. I found myself taking my bill money and paying for drugs. And that's the way that the addiction to the drug will treat you, and that's the road that it will take you down. You sit back, and I feel like, you know, I talk about it now as if I was a hypocrite then, which I was. Because I'd say how much I love my wife and my kids, and then I was living like hell, you know. And I do believe the whole time that I was living this way, that those times that I would knock on Jesus' door and ask him for help when I got in binds and stuff, I always got an answer. He always pulled me through somehow, some way. He would use my dad, or he would use my family members, and he was always there. He was always on the other side of the door when I went looking for him. Well, as cocaine took me deeper and deeper into addiction, I started staying away from home. I got to where when I partied, I partied so much that I couldn't even drive myself home. I'd be too intoxicated or too high or anything like that. And my wife loved me so much, she'd tell me, she knew that I was out partying, but she'd say, if you can't drive home, just stay where you're at. Get to where you can drive home and then come home. So I found myself staying out overnight at people's houses and this, that, and the other. And that went on for several years, a couple of years, until, and I was telling the pastor about this little part of my testimony, and he kind of thought it was interesting, but you know, he talks about having a God intervention, or you know, where you feel like you've really seen God, where you can reach out and touch him. I was in my truck one early morning, and I'd gotten to where I was laying out of work every once in a while because I partied so hard I couldn't get back up the next day to collect myself to go to work. But I knew that the time was drawing near because my body was growing weak. And after staying out and doing what I done, I didn't have much energy left once I come off that high. And I got in my truck from this friend's house, and my wife was waiting on me. I knew she was waiting on me because I should have already been at home. But the whole time, from the time I got in my truck at his house, it was a short distance to home. I cranked that old truck up, and I took that old Chevrolet down the road, and I didn't get far down the road at all. I started weeping. I started crying out. Because I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what was coming next. I didn't know if I was going to live much longer. And I didn't really want to meet the Lord, but I didn't know what to do. So I cried out. I cried out to the Lord as hard as I've ever cried before in my life. I didn't know if I was going to take that truck and run it into a tree, or I didn't know what I was supposed to do or what I was going to do. But it didn't take me just a couple miles up the road. I poured my heart out. I said, God, I know I've already cried to you before about this, but I got to do something for myself or I'm going to kill myself. I feel my body weakening, and I feel my mind being deteriorated. And I looked over at the truck beside of me, and he was sitting in the truck. He was sitting in the truck just as plain as you are in front of me now. And we had a conversation. I said, Lord, I don't know what to do, but I got to have help. I said, I'm going home, but my wife don't want me no more. I said, I've used up all my I'm sorry's and I'll forgive you. I've used them all up. And he sat back in that truck just as calm as my dad would. Sat back in that old truck smoking a cigarette. Of course, the Lord wasn't smoking a cigarette. But the Lord sat back in that seat just as calm as he could be. And he told me, he said, well, son, he said, I've always been here for you. He said, are you ready to give it up? He said, I've asked you this question many times before and you've gone back. But he said, you know, I get tired of saving you. I get tired of pulling you back. He said, if you're serious about it, I'm going to intervene today. There's something going to happen in your life that's going to change your life today. I said, Lord, I don't want this lifestyle no more. I said, I'm tired of it. I don't want it anymore. He said, well, he said, just as I promised you, I'm going to take care of it. He said, now drive his truck home. And he said, just be still and wait. So I went home. My wife was waiting on me. And this is when the story gets real interesting. I get home. Genevieve meets me at the door. We have our little discussion, argument. And I basically told Genevieve, I said, this is it, honey. I said, there's some things going on in my life. I can't live like this anymore. And I'm not really sure what I need to do about it. But I said, my heart's broken and I can't go on living like I'm living. And so this is where my story somewhat becomes a miracle. The way that God orchestrated what he told me he was going to do in that truck. I've got 3 older sisters. One of them lives in Maryland. And she was kind of out of the picture because she wasn't close enough to do anything. But I have my oldest sister, Judy, lived in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. She was married to a gynecologist. And she was an RN nurse. And my middle sister, Sandra Stewart, and her husband, Mark Stewart, he's a police officer. And when I told Genevieve what was going on, I told her that I was going to have some help. I needed to make a change. I needed some help in my life, and I wasn't sure where I was supposed to go get it. But I told Genevieve, I said, I got to make some phone calls, and I got to find out something. I got to find out where I can get some help. I got to have some help. So, at any other time in my life, or my two sisters that I mentioned, my oldest sister and my middle sister, Judy and Sandra, at any other time in their lives, they could have been a multiple of places. But when I think I called my middle sister Sandra, and I cried out to her, and I told her what the situation was. I said, Sandra, I said, I don't feel like I'm going to be able to make it through this, and I said, I need some help, and I want to know if you can give me some help. So she hung up the telephone, and she called my older sister that was living at the beach. And just so happened, my oldest sister was sitting right by the telephone in front of her computer. And she told my oldest sister about what was going on. And my oldest sister, I think she kind of came to the conclusion that I might need some professional help. And I had come to that point. So she put a phone call in, and she started doing some checking. She wanted to try to help me by finding a rehab center or somewhere that I could go. Knowing the medical field like her and her husband did, she knew that was a professional thing that I needed to do. I needed to go get professional help and figure out how to whip this thing. And so she started making phone calls, and she started trying to find out some things. Meanwhile, my middle sister's husband, Mark, just so happened on this day, at this time, my brother-in-law was in Monroe, or in Charlotte. And Sandra had to phone him. He was in a doctor's office. And all this stuff's being orchestrated, you know. I'm sitting at the house waiting on phone calls back just to keep me in tab with what they found out. But all this stuff's being orchestrated this day. And God put these people in these places. My oldest sister found a place called First Step Rehabilitation, an in-house rehabilitation center in Monroe, North Carolina. This place had a waiting list to get in. And I know you guys don't know my sister from Adam's Cat, but my oldest sister is she's very persistent. She's very outgoing, outspoken. And she called me. She said, my brother's got to have help, and he's got to have it now. They asked her some questions, and she said, fine, whatever you need, you let me know. And they told her, if I could get there within so many hours, that they'd take me on in that day. I don't know why. They had a waiting list. So my brother-in-law was in Charlotte. He got the phone call. He rode by the First Step Rehabilitation Center, which wasn't but a few miles from where he was at on the road at that point in time. Told him that he was coming to my house to get me and wanted to know if everything was okay and if he brought me and all that stuff. He immediately left there. He came back to Gastonia. He put me in the car, told me to pack a couple bags on the phone on his way. He said, Jeff, get you a couple things, whatever you feel like you got to have, I'll be there in 30 minutes. He came to my house. Genevieve had to go pick up one of our boys, I think, at school, or take one of them to school or something. And she didn't know what was going on. Genevieve didn't know a bit more